One of these observations that I've made in my own life is that we as human beings often strive for safety, and that our thoughts and actions are often governed by fear, and it is hard to say if you will ever reach a point in life where we will be free from that. If you struggle to make ends meet and you work really hard to build something for yourself, you will probably do that with the feeling that all you need to be happy is to make a little more. If only the most basic things in your life were covered, how great would life be? At that point, your fear revolves around being able to pay the next bill. It's all about survival. Well, skip ahead a few years and you might actually make more money than you need to survive. But now, all of a sudden, you might realize that a new fear has entered your life. What if I lose what I have just built for myself? The situation has definitely improved, but you see that feeling of fear, it probably never leaves, it just readjusts its focus. It can be relationships, health problems, you name it. So in other words, yes, it's wise to strive for safety and work for that, but the big questions will still probably never stop to haunt you. And that's why it's a good idea, in my opinion, to fill the remaining time slots with answering questions you actually can solve. Problems that might be hard, but not impossible to answer. And in my humble opinion, repairing and repurposing things is just that. You focus on a very specific goal, bring something back, create meaning where others see the end of a story. And if you're anything like me, you'll find joy in that. In that sense, let us see then what we can find on the scrap here today. This huge blower here is nothing I really need for myself, but I know someone who does, so we'll try to get that running again. This side channel pump here is probably 50 years old, but ever since the floodings we had last year in Germany, I just can't walk past any quality pump. So I'll buy that as well. Right now I'm not sure what this strange looking device even is, but it oozes quality and I'm curious to just take it apart and see what it does. And I was actually just about to retrieve some of the parts from this contraption here, but I was too slow. It was smashed to pieces before I could get there. On the upside though, I found these two workshop carts here and we'll put some work into those today. And since I have found interesting things there for the last episode, I also revisited the thrift store and got lucky again. I found this rare digital audio tape recorder and an absolute treasure, a Braun Audio 300 stereo system from the end of the 1960s. And I'd say, let's do our best then to bring those treasures back to life. Let's start with something fun then, and even though this one is also very heavy and not without its dangers, it would certainly be exciting to see this huge blower in action. It's a 3 kilowatts centrifugal fan made by the German company Ziehl-Abegg, apparently around the year 2007. And compared to most items in this series, that is practically new. Nevertheless, 15 years was more than enough time to collect a centimeter thick layer of dust and dirt on basically all internal surfaces. And what you see on this dustpan is simply what fell out of the housing of this fan just by moving it around the workbench. And that is why I will now start to disassemble this device, which means that I want to pull out the impeller, which also contains the motor, and that is why I have started to remove this wire from the enclosure. On the back side of the cover of this terminal box here, we also find a wiring diagram, and it tells me that this is a 3-phase induction motor that can be wired in Delta or Y configuration. I spray some penetrating oil on the bolts holding this 3-branched part here that holds the motor axle in place. I also marked the parts so that I will later be able to reinstall everything exactly the way it was oriented originally. After turning the housing or volute on its side and having removed the parts holding the impeller inside, I'm now able to pull it out of the housing. This part weighs almost 45 kilograms, by the way. Now we can see the full extent of the dirt that has collected here, both on the hub and blades of the rotor, as well as inside the volute. As thick as the dust is though, it can mostly be scraped off by hand and then vacuumed with a vacuum cleaner. This friendly looking fellow here is called Henry, by the way, and we actually found it on the street on a pile of trash 3 years ago, and it just turned out to be a really good vacuum cleaner. And I proceed by cleaning all the surfaces I can reach this way. In the meantime, I went outside and I'm also wearing a dust mask because I have no idea where this fan was used, and which chemical compounds that dust might or might not contain. The actual impeller consists of the curved blades on the outside of this rotor, while the hub in the middle contains the motor, a 3-phase induction motor to be more precise. In German, a hub motor like this is sometimes referred to as an Außenläufer, meaning motor with external rotor. The physics are basically the same as in an ordinary Innenläufer or internal rotor type induction motor, only that here the rotor rotates outside the stator instead of the other way around. But a vacuum cleaner only gets us so far in this case, and I guess it's time to reveal my new wonder weapon, also known as a steam cleaner, that I recently bought to make my life a little easier. And I don't know if it's based in the nature of the cleaning process or simply because it's new to me, but I really like using this thing. It dissolves the seemingly unbreakable bond between the items of your desire and nasty filthy grime within seconds. How can something that nobody put any work or effort into and that just happens be as strong and persistent as the power by which dirt clings to everything? And I'm trying to clean off all the blades, preferably when they are under the hub so that the condensed water doesn't somehow seep into the motor. Because that is of course one of the things you have to be careful about when steam cleaning. It also works wonders in getting old stickers off, which usually happen to even surpass dirt in their clinginess. And I also clean the inside of the volute, and after that the parts are quickly dried with an electric heater. It would now be possible to pull the rotor apart, but I frankly would only do that if I could hear or feel that the bearings are worn out or if there was damage to the wires, which doesn't seem to be the case here. And here is a little before and after comparison of the entire cleaning process. And after climbing back onto the workbench, I was now able to put the blower back together. The reason why I brought this device back home is that very good friends of mine are just moving into a new workshop, and they recently told me that I should keep an eye out for something like this. They need a big fan or blower for air circulation purposes inside their new building. So let's see then if it works. It probably doesn't look too safe to stand next to this beast, and that's why I only tested it for short bursts here. The airflow here is so strong that I can hardly hold the old jacket in my hands. Let's have a look at the service carts then. This one, with its blue paint and general style of design, is rather typical for a German workshop cart. This smaller one is also very sturdily built, but I'm not sure it was used in a workshop before. It might have been in a kitchen or some other place. What I had in mind here was to change the general look of these carts so that they could be converted into something that would be nice enough to find its way into someone's apartment or house. You know, it's been a general observation of mine that at least here in the city, more and more people like the idea of using older workshop furniture in their houses. With the bigger cart, I started by wire wheeling the surfaces, not necessarily to remove all the old paint, but just in order to prep it for a new coat of paint. After that, a degreaser was used, and then the surfaces were wiped clean before a coat of hemorrhoid paint was applied. But as you can see in this footage here, wire wheeling the paint always leaves you with a mess, and it's certainly not great to release the paint dust into the environment. I therefore tried something else with the smaller cart. I applied some drops of dishwashing fluid onto the smaller cart and used the steam cleaner to get the surfaces as clean as possible. After that, it was also additionally treated with some degreaser, and the same hemorrhoid paint was applied. As a nice contrast to the dark gray paint, I decided that I would use some planed spruce boards that I would only use a transparent protective varnish on. These boards have tongue and groove connections because they are actually intended as floor covering material. I bought them 2 years ago but never used them for the intended purpose. After the paint had dried for a few days, I inserted the boards and fastened them with small screws from the bottom side. We'll just have to see if the paint holds as well on the small card as on the bigger one, but it's actually looking good up to this point. And here a little before and after comparison. You might also remember that some weeks ago I found this rather tall cabinet here, and by tall I mean tall. It's over 2 meters, 40 centimeters in height, and actually looks comically big when you stand in front of it. I'm sure it was once used for an electric installation, but I thought that it would also actually make for a pretty good piece of furniture. So some more of the spruce boards were cut so that they could simply be inserted here. The cabinet should certainly be fastened to the wall though. I don't know if it's your style, but if I had a larger apartment or a house, I would gladly put these things in there. What do you think? Let's take a look at the pump then. It is another side channel pump, and I say that because we had a pump made by that same company, Siemens and Hinch, abbreviated SIHI, in episode 26 as well. This pump is even older though, and you can see that it consists of two main parts, a 3-phase induction motor on the one hand, and then an independent pump housing on the other hand. The pump is completely seized though, and you cannot turn it by hand at all. After cleaning these parts a little bit from the outside and removing the guard, I first unbolt the motor from the common cast iron base to see if it works. As you can see here, it is coupled to the pump shaft with a piece of rubber that will act as a buffer between the two. In this terminal box of the old motor, we still find remains of the former wiring. I install a new power cord and then I test the motor to see if it works properly. It runs smoothly and doesn't seem to have any issues. The pump, on the other hand, is completely stuck. Before actually trying to take the entire pump apart, I had the faint hope that it was just a little rusty inside and that I could get the impellers loose by pouring some citric acid into the pump housing. And well, a reaction started right away and I was able to remove some of the rust, but of course the pump was still stuck. So I decided to take the pump apart, and I knew that this wouldn't be easy. I removed the 4 bolts which are normally holding the entire pump together, and then I started to take off layer by layer. The last pump we found had a housing that was entirely made from brass apparently. In this case the housing is made from cast iron, which is of course prone to some degree of corrosion when in contact with water. The rotors though, as brown and rusty as they may look here, are actually made from brass. The shaft is made from stainless steel. Even though it looked really bad at first, I was able to get the rotors somewhat shiny again and managed to get almost all rust off of the cast iron parts by wire wheeling them. They had indeed rusted to such a degree that the brass rotors were stuck because of a layer of rust between them and the pump housing. It would have been possible to grind or even machine the cast iron surfaces down to get a really smooth finish, but I guess that would only have made them more prone to further rusting. Instead, I only wire wheeled them, and then I decided to treat them with some food-grade grease in the attempt to delay rusting, at least in the near future. The outer edges of the cast iron parts were degreased and then dried, and then I applied a special type of silicone to act as a liquid sealant between all the layers. The same also happened with the flanges of the pump housing. I waited for the sealant to dry, and that took several days because it was really cold here. I then filled the pump housing with water. As long as that is the case, the pump should then be able to prime itself, meaning that it should be able to suck the water from a reservoir even when the hoses are not completely filled with fluid yet. And that is actually one of the theoretical advantages of these side channel pumps over ordinary centrifugal pumps. and the pump is doing better than I expected. And as you can see here, I can disrupt the water flow and then put this intake hose back into the water after a few seconds, and the pump manages to still build up a vacuum and re-establish a good flow rate over time. Without completely running dry, that is. This ability is one of the main reasons why this pump type can be used to pump a mixture of fluids and gases, like for example water and steam, as it is often needed in industrial processes. And remember this strange looking thing here? I knew from the beginning that it was incomplete, but it looked very ruggedly built and I had never seen anything like it. That's why I still took it to the workshop. After cleaning it a little bit, removing these 3 nuts from the bottom and unscrewing the front panel, I was able to pull this thing apart and we can now look at the insides. Mounted on a very heavy cast iron base, we find 3 leaf springs and a kind of electromagnet. And with this information I was able to find out what it is. It is a vibrating device, in German called Siebschüttler or Schüttelturm. The English term might be vibro sifter or something like that, and the idea is that you stack a tower of sieves with decreasing grit size on top of the vibrating part of this machine, and then it can just automatically shake these sieves. Apparently this is used as laboratory equipment in the cement industry, for example. Any good idea what else we could use this for in the workshop? I thought about sieving blasting media from a sandblasting cabinet, for example. Let's have a look at that DAT, digital audio tape recorder then. This is really a rare find, and I have never seen one of these players in a thrift store or at a flea market before. One reason is probably that they are quite valuable. 10 euros is a laughable price for this unit, and I got really lucky here, if I can fix it of course. This unit though has a label that says für Bastler, and that's just a euphemism which directly translated means for tinkerers. And translated to straight talk, that simply means defective, faulty, not working. If you ever tried to buy anything from Germany online, you might have encountered the term Bastler before. Not just when it comes to electronics, but also cars and even houses. And it really can mean anything ranging from has a minor issue to complete basket case. In this case, the tape drive just won't open when you press the eject button. And after removing sticker and tape with a plastic scraper, I open the enclosure. It actually looks not too bad in here, no dust or signs of former repair attempts. As you can see, the mechanism that pushes the tape down is first lifted up, but then it fails to eject. And the reason is rather simple apparently. The motor keeps spinning, but the little rubber belt here is so worn out that it's just slipping, so that the larger pulley here won't even move anymore. In order to replace the belt, we will have to remove a few gears first though. In order to do that, I first unscrew a little screw on top of that steel washer holding down the big white plastic gear. And by pressing down this mechanism, I'm able to pull that gear out. Under that, we find another intermediate gear that also has to be taken out here temporarily. I was now able to open the eject mechanism manually, making it easier to reach the motor. I removed the old worn out belt, and since I recently rediscovered my interest in vintage audio repairs, I made sure to stock up on replacement belts in the meantime. And I install a new belt. That of course has to be a little tighter than the old one. Let's see then if the mechanism works. And that looks pretty good. The cassette even seems to be playing, but we won't know for certain if it really works before we test the playback and record functions. For that purpose, I have now connected the player to the amplifier we repaired in the last episode. That was episode 27 by the way. This is episode 28, and all other episodes are linked in the video description under this video. But what's actually on that tape that came with the device? Well, the former owner must have been a fan of traditional Bavarian music. By the way, what is DAT anyway? Well, Sony introduced digital audio tape in 1987, and it did find its way into the professional recording and film industry, but was never really a thing in normal households. When it comes to quality, this format is said to be able to deliver superior quality over CDs. Depending on the settings of course, but it also comes with the additional benefit of being able to, well, record, erase and re-record, etc. And since it's a digital medium, loss-free copying is possible as well. And speaking of recording, let's test that as well then. I have now connected a tablet to the input of the tape deck, and since I have recently been playing around with composing electronic music on the tablet, we will just try to record some of that onto the tape. And that works just fine as well. A pretty unique and lucky find, in my opinion. Last but not least, let's have a look at the Braun stereo system. To be more precise, it's a Braun Audio 300 made around 1969, and this is another exceptional find because this is a highly sought after collector's item, and similar devices can rather be found in museums than in thrift stores. This book here, titled Braun 50 Years of Product Design, shows how the German electronics and home appliances manufacturer Braun revolutionized product design in the 1960s. One of the major influences here was the team behind German industrial designer Dieter Rams. I've not only been a fan of the design, but also of Braun's outstandingly high quality standards, at that time at least. And we have encountered Braun audio devices on this channel before, like when I repaired this music console from 1957 a few years ago. A link to that is down in the video description. And what about the Audio 300 unit itself though? The device seems to be in pretty good optical condition, and upon turning it on I briefly test the radio receivers. And this is always a hard thing to do on video because I will get copyright problems with YouTube when I record music that's playing on the radio as I film. But there doesn't seem to be any issues with the receiver and amplifiers. Let's test the turntable then. And just like with the radio programs, I always have to choose something that is rather odd so that I won't run into copyright strikes here as well. And that's why I have to choose the popular record Geräusche in Stereo, sounds in stereo, with this edition focusing on field recordings of ship engine noises and other maritime sounds. It becomes clear though that the turntable is rotating way too slowly. In order to take care of that, I will replace the drive belt and see if that helps anything. First, I take off the transparent cover. For that purpose, there are two screws hidden on the back side, each of which has an irregularly shaped screw head that, when turned by a few degrees, will release the hinge mechanism of the cover. Upon lifting off the actual table of the record player, we can already see the old belt, and it can be removed with ease. It was likewise not hard to find a replacement belt online, and I installed that. Depending on the state of degradation of the old belt, it might or might not be necessary to clean the pulley surfaces. And here we can see how the speed adjustment of this record player works. A small motor has a brass pulley with 4 different diameter steps fitted on its motor shaft. Then a height adjustable rubber friction wheel can make contact on 4 different heights that you can choose between. In addition, a copper disc is also installed on the motor shaft, and together with an adjustable radius permanent magnet, it forms an eddy current brake that can be used to tweak the rotational speed on top of the 4 base speed settings. And with the new belt installed, I'm now able to play the record at the correct speed. But while moving this unit around, I could hear that something else is not right. Something is loose. It sounded like a small piece of something is moving inside the enclosure. In order to open the enclosure, I will turn the entire unit on its head. And because I don't want to damage the record player and other sensitive parts on the top, I'm improvising a support from wood. I'm using some smooth pieces of 2x4 and the old wooden plate from one of the workshop carts. Before turning this device around, I also have to remove the turntable and some underlying parts. After doing that, I can now also see what might be wrong here. Looks like a plastic part has broken off here. After securing the arm of the record player, I proceed to unscrew the bottom cover. Another unusual thing about Braun audio devices compared to most other manufacturers is that the various jacks for external sound sources, loudspeakers, etc. are hidden in the bottom. They probably did that for optical reasons, but it is not particularly practical when you move these things often. Let's have a look inside then. Here in the corner is the mains transformer. This is the voltage selector. As you can see, it can optionally run on 110 volts. This is a fuse, and over here we have one of the full bridge rectifiers and also some electrolytic capacitors on that same board. This connector here is typical for 1960s Braun equipment. This was one of the first transistorized models from Braun, but these connectors are actually vacuum tube sockets that Braun used as multi-pin jacks and plugs after vacuum tubes themselves were already gone, and you can find them here in various places. Over here are the 2 power amplifiers for the left and right channel with the big heatsinks. And here are the old German DIN type connectors for loudspeakers, second record player, tape recorder, as well as AM and FM antennas. This is the variable capacitor assembly for the FM tuner. Over here are the actual tuner circuits, and we can see that the rubber bands holding down the ferrite antenna have gone brittle over time. And looking through here, I was now able to find the little piece that had broken off. I glued it back in place, and at least for now, the mechanism works again. Now I'm pretty sure that sooner or later I will do a little more to preserve this beautiful piece of history for the future. But for now, there don't seem to be any bigger malfunctions. So that's what I had to show you for today. And as always, I hope that you enjoyed it. And if that is the case, please give this video a like and let me know that I should make more of these Repair-A-Thons in the future. And if you want to support me in my efforts a little more actively, you can also make a donation via PayPal. A link for that is down in the video description. Or become a supporter on Patreon under patreon.com/tpai. See you soon.